Hello, welcome to OpenRose. So today we are going to talk about exporting data. Now let me start by first going to our GitHub repository for OpenRose. This is where you will find all the information about the source code as well as the wiki documentation. First thing that I want to show is the enhancement request that we have received for exporting and importing data from OpenRose. If I go to project and look at the OpenRose project, we have these export and import requirements data as a user story. It's very simple. As a user of OpenRose application, I want to be able to export project, requirements item type, or requirements items to the file system so that I can share it with others and import it in another OpenRose repository. Very simple three-liner user story, which is nothing but export and import of data request. And they have also clarified that I would like to export from three different levels. A project level, that is the complete project data export, requirements item type level, which is the next level below the project, or the requirement itself along with its child requirements. Now, we cannot just use this as an input for our development team to start working on this request, and we cannot actually fit it in one simple iteration or a sprint as well. The first thing we need to do is do a detailed analysis of these user story and come up with a plan to execute upon this user story. So in this video, we are only going to talk about what we have analyzed out of this user story and what we are planning to do in terms of supporting data, first for export part and then for the import part. So today we'll only talk about the export aspect here. Based on this user story, our team sat down, had a brainstorming session, jotted down different ideas, and came up with a ultimately clear and more precise specific requirements about how we would like to execute this. You can call them requirements or you can call them user stories, but ultimately they are all plugged into this epic user story, which is nothing but export and import of requirements data. Now currently, to share this information with the community, we also decided to create a documentation for the same in a wiki environment. So now here I am in the wiki area, jotted down concept of exporting data from OpenRose. So if I go inside there, so here we have listed a lot of information about the considerations that we have given for that import and export of data from OpenRose user story. First thing first, what data types are we going to export? So as per the original request or requirement, we are going to export entire project, a given requirement type, or a requirement including child requirements breakdown structure. To explain this more in detail, let me just show a diagram. This is a diagram that I'm going to use in my paintbrush. A OpenRose has a repository, which is nothing but SQL Server database containing several projects in it. In this example, we have one project which can then have multiple item types. In this example, we have one item type which has two root level requirements, and one of the root level requirement has got structure, which is nothing but a broken down structure of requirements hierarchy, which we call it as requirements breakdown structure. Now you can identify that as a structure, or you can identify this as a structure. So it's a sub requirement below the root requirement within the item type, and that sub requirement is also further broken down into child requirements. The idea is to allow users to export the selected section or the identified section or the entire item type. So this is a second scenario, or the entire project itself. So that's the third scenario. The idea is to allow export of these structural data based on a single record selection. And here we are going to either select the whole project, which means we are selecting this entire section, or we are talking about selecting item type, which is this section, or we are talking about selecting an individual item or a requirement, or a requirement with a child breakdown structure. So that's the idea in terms of single record selection. Okay, so let's go back to our documentation. Now we have very clear understanding of 3 different single record that we could select to identify what data we want to export. Then the next section here is about exporting repository details. So here we are going to make sure that every repository has a unique ID assigned to it. It would be ideal to export the repository information, because if you are importing back into the same repository, then processing logic that can be applied perhaps in the future if we just want to update an existing set of requirements data that were exported from a given specific repository. So right now we are not going to do a lot with the repository ID, but it's ready for the future, whereby identifying the origin of the data, it would be very useful to allow import logics to be applied in the future. So we will include some information about the repository. Excluding attachments from export. What it means is, currently we do not really support attaching any data like a binary file, an image, a video, a Word document, Excel file, PDF file, so different sorts of data to your requirements objects or your items within OpenRose. So because there are no possibility to attach a physical binary file at this version of the OpenRose while I'm recording this video, we do not support exporting those binaries into the target exported location. And that means we are only exporting textual data. That is important, that we are only currently exporting textual data. If you have any links that is pointing to documents stored in Google Drive or in Dropbox or in SharePoint or in OneDrive or some other location, we are not going to go and grab those data and export it. We will only export textual data, which is nothing but requirements name, status, priority, description, severity. These are the attributes which holds the textual data, and that's what we are going to export. When it comes to exporting fields like description, we are going to convert certain aspects. In fact, we will also do the same for properties like name as well, where you could insert spatial characters. Those characters which will come in the way for the JSON format to be compliant will be escaped. So you can see that in JSON, we will have double quotes being used to identify the key and the value for the given data set. Now, if in your description you have those special characters, like you have in double quotes sponsors or press reporters and attendees for your charity fundraising event, because they are being put in double quotes, we'll have to escape those double quotes. So if you want to bring this data back into the repository in the same exact value, that's why to make it JSON compliant, we will use this method, whereby those special characters are escaped using backslash. And this is just some internal mechanism for object serialization and deserialization between C# objects and JSON objects. Though we are discussing about the enhancement request, I just wanted to add this technical information because the team came up with this important information, which is nothing but that the target export format in which the data will be stored, which is the textual data, is going to be JSON. Now, another thing we would like to do is to export information about field metadata. There are few fields which are of type list box or drop down list box, like status, priority, severity. And we want to make sure that we somehow include information not only about the individual record, what is the status for a given requirement and what is the priority of the given requirement, but what are the different possible values that you can capture in this drop down list box. This will be important to allow any data mapping that needs to take place in the future, because we should be able to see and make the exported data compliant to the target import environment. For now, we will include the field metadata information that the status has possibility to capture 5 different values. Then those 5 different values that we can use as a selection option in the status field will be included in the export JSON file for reference purpose. Then we go to traceability data. Now we know that in OpenRose it's quite free to allow different types of data to be linked via traceability, different types of requirements to be linked via traceability. So the idea here is to export all the traceability information about the requirements which are in scope. Now to explain that, let me go back to this diagram. Let's say we have traceability. Let me just draw a rough traceability using a green arrow, that we have a traceability from here to here. Oh, that's too thick. Let me just make it a bit small. So we have traceability between these two, and we have traceability between, let's say, these two as well, and we have traceability between these two. Okay. Now, when I export the data for the entire item type, which means I'm exporting this whole set, right? Then you can see all the 3 traceability data is in scope, which means the requirements that we are exporting under the item type, having these 3 links, will show up in the exported data as 3 different traceabilities. But if I'm going to export, let's say, only this set of data, right? In this case, the traceability between, let me select records, this record and this record, that traceability will not be exported, because the problem is with this particular record. It is not in scope of the exported data. So we will not export that traceability. But this traceability will be exported because it is in scope. We are exporting 4 records and 2 of them are linked to each other using traceability. So we will export that. So that's the traceability part. Now, if I have, let me draw another traceability information, that if I have a trace going from here to here, maybe I should draw using these lines. So with the free option. So if I have trace going between these and this, and if I have trace going between this and this, and if I have a trace going from here back to here, which means it is a circular trace, right? I will, if I just keep jumping between the trace, then I'll go from record this down to here, and then I'll go down to here, and then I'll go back up over here, then again down here, and then again down here, and then I'll again continue up back here. So it's a circular trace, right? I don't want to allow circular trace to be exported. So in this case, what am I going to do? In this case, I'm going to show that I will not export the duplicate traceability data. I'll break that circular reference in my exported output. Otherwise, I'll just have a continuous loop to keep going through the circular traces. So as soon as I find that already the information for the given trace is there, so record A links to record B links to record C links to record A, So it's going back. So as soon as it finds that I need to travel back from A to B, and it says that this data is already there in the export output format or export data set, then I'll not really export this data, and I'll stop processing the navigation path from identified set of requirements data that I'm going to export the traceability for. Now, this is going to be very useful for people who really use documents management system for requirements management. Ability to export traceability and remove the circular references and then import it back in the future in another repository or perhaps in the same repository, I think it will be bringing quite a lot of value to the users of OpenRose. The next thing that we discussed is excluding change history data. What it means is we have updated requirements records over a period of time. So let me go to my OpenRose and just go to the projects, and let me show you that I have a charity fundraising projects as one of the sample project that we use. Now here we have three options actually. We have three item types: pre-fundraising preparation, fundraising event execution, and post-fundraising activities. And as you can see here, we have some breakdown structure. Now if I take the first record in the first item type and change the status from new to approved, save this, and change the severity from low to medium and save this, then here in the change history you can see there is information building up. You can see what was originally added and how over the period of time this information changed. This is great. We have the change log, the change history. But when we export the data, do we really need to export all the change history? Perhaps not. We don't need to export all this data. So what are we going to do? We are going to only export the current data, which is nothing but in details you have the name, the status is approved, priority is medium, severity is medium, and the description. This is the current snapshot, the current set of data, and that's what we are exporting. We are not exporting the whole history of how data has changed for a given requirement. The same will be applicable for all the requirements that we are going to export as part of the export identification set. Okay, so that's all about the change history. Then we are going to talk about export data by filtering criteria. What I mean is, if I have large number of records, so here if I expand all, I have a lot of data here, a lot of requirements here, and in each requirement you have attributes. And if I say show me all the data, like for example, if I have an option to filter out the data, to say show me only those requirements where status is equal to new and severity is equal to low. In this case, many of the records will not be included. Perhaps only few records will be there. So we are not going to allow filtering of the data and then export the selection in this particular iteration, because what we want to maintain is the structure, the hierarchical structure and the traceability structure. So if you export this particular requirement, which is create and publish social media videos, reels, showcasing fundraising success requirement, then I would like to export plan video content, identify key moments to capture, draft script and visual concepts, produce and edit the video reels, and then also publish and promote. So all these sub records should be exported. If I allow exporting data by filtering criteria, then there is possibility that some of these records may not be exported. And for example, let's say if plan video content is not compliant, but draft script is compliant to the filtering criteria, then how can I really export draft script and visual concepts without exporting its parent? How will it fit in the import criteria? Will it simply go and become a child of the create and publish social media videos requirement? Well, if so, then it's actually losing the overall contextual structure, and that's why we have decided not to export the data related to the filtering criteria at the moment. Okay, now we are going to talk about exporting from a baseline. So as we know, in our project, we can take baselines. Let me see if I have any baselines here. There are no baselines found for the charity fundraising event, but I can really create the baseline by project or by item type. Let me just create a baseline by project. This is, let's say, demo for exporting data baseline. This is just a demo baseline. I'm just creating a simple baseline here, and then let me create it. Once the baseline is created, we can see that particular baseline being created. And again, we know that within the baseline, when I open the baseline, we can see information in a very similar fashion, like I'm looking at the project, but it's a snapshot of the project at any given point in time. This is one of the features of OpenRose, which is allowing us to take the baseline. Now, I should be able to export data from a baseline. So if I select a baseline, there should be an option to select the whole baseline or a particular baseline item type or a particular record, which is a baseline requirement item, including if it has got any child items. So here, when I select create and publish social media video, which is a baseline requirement item, then it should allow me to export that and also export its breakdown structure of all those baseline requirements items. That's the idea, that I should be allowed to do an export of my selection. But on the other hand, we also know that there's a special feature within the baseline. We create the baseline so that we can negotiate with our customers or our team what is feasible, what are we going to deliver. And if we say that in this particular iteration we are not able to deliver all the aspects, all the requirements, so in this publish, which is the overall user story, I'm not able to actually do the second part, which is publish and promote. I can produce the video for editing purposes, but I'm not able to publish and promote the video in the first iteration. That feature will not be ready. So I can go ahead and exclude that from the baseline. So you can see here very clearly that when I exclude the parent, all its children are excluded. And when I export now the actual higher level of the requirement, which is create and publish social media videos, then it should only export up to this point, which is edit videos for social media platforms. I'm just creating and editing the videos, but I'm not able to do a publishing. That's why export of the higher level requirement from a baseline will exclude by default excluded requirement items, which are these three items in this case. But what we are going to also think about is ability to export the excluded requirements as well. So we should give an option to the user to choose, do they only want to export the included requirements or also the excluded requirements? If they decide to not include the excluded requirements in the export, then the traceability that will be exported will be for only those baseline requirement items which are in scope of the export. Now that is something I can explain it here. So let's say if you have taken a snapshot of it. So I'll just go ahead and select a project with item type. I'll just create a snapshot. This will not be called project. It will be basically called baseline. So here you can say this is not going to be called project. This is going to be called really a baseline. Let me make it this and call it as, and I'm just going to move this up here. Okay, so that's basically not the project but the actual baseline. Now I can go ahead and select the pen to pick up the color. just so that this is, a little bit better looking. Okay, so we have the baseline, which is nothing but a project snapshot, right? Now, if I decide to exclude these requirements, but before I do the exclusion, let me just draw certain traceability. So there is a trace from here to here, and there is a trace from here to here. And what we have decided is these items are marked as exclusion, or these baseline items are marked for excluding it from the baseline. We're not going to deliver them. Now, if I export the whole baseline, then the trace between these two records will not be included. Why? Because there is no reason why we are able to include this set of requirements. Let me identify them. So I'm going to use a blue color here, because this set of baseline requirement will not be included in the set. Only 4 requirements are included, which is the root or 2 root items, and the first root item has 2 sub-childrens. Those are the one which will be exported. That's why this trace that we have identified will not be exported, but this trace, which is between this record, let me just identify that, these 2 records will be exported. So that's how I wanted to explain the whole concept of what we are planning to do when it comes to doing the export of data, which are nothing but requirements data based on a simple user story that we have received. So we had to consider all the different features that we have implemented in OpenRose before we would allow even development team to start working on it. If we don't consider all this thing and if we don't implement it properly, then our customers will not be able to reap benefits of these open source requirements management solution. We encourage you to please share about this product with others. If you have ability and time to support the community and contribute to the project, not only via source code, but by bringing in your expertise around documentation, about the requirements management as a subject, agile and scrum ways of working, or different processes that you use in your product development. Doesn't have to be the IT product. It could be any other product that you develop where you capture the requirement. It could also be an event that you're organizing. It could be also a repetitive task that you are supposed to do again and again over time. All those things where requirements or needs or ideas are captured and processed. If you have ability to contribute to this project, then please feel free to join the force. The next one is the export format. As we discussed, we're going to use JSON as a format. We have identified one very good article about escaping guide for JSON. It is for encoding between C# objects and JSON objects. There are many other libraries which are available. Out of the box, we would use one of those important libraries, but we didn't want to forget about showing the detail that we're going to do exporting textual information, and then export format will be JSON for now. Then we have one more information about the format version numbering. So like we have product version numbering, where we can see what is the current version of the product. So for example, if you go to OpenRose, you go to settings, then you can see the current version that I'm using is version 0.1.2 alpha 17 plus. Likewise, the export itself that we generate, the output in JSON file, should also have some version number, version 100, version 1.10.200, something like that, because we want to make sure that we understand not only the origin of the data, where it came from, which repository it came from, but what was the actual version used for generating the output for the export format in the JSON format. In future, there could be schema changes, the way we structure the data in JSON could change, And when we do such schema changes for the export format, we will update that version to the next version. And then we may also have to be compliant in terms of when we allow importing that data, we have to first understand the structure. That's why we will look at the version of the exported data format and then understand the structure, verify that the data complies to the required schema, and then import that into a target environment. So that's why numbering, the version numbering of the exported data is also very important. Now, if you just want to really do export of data and then import it back into the same repository, then we do suggest to use copy feature. You know that in OpenRose we have the ability to copy, and we can copy a project, an item type, or item. And this is very simple. We have created demo videos about all these three options. This is more better rather than exporting and importing it back into the same repository. This is much faster, and hopefully this will have in future better support for binaries as well as attachments and data that you store within the large description box. So that's the complete detailed analysis of what we are going to target in terms of supporting the feature of export and import of data from OpenRose. I hope you like this. I hope you will contribute and share this information with others who can be benefited. OpenRose is a free and open source requirements management tool. And with that, we just would like to thank you for your time, for your comments, and for supporting this initiative to help organizations and individuals and teams to do requirements management in a nice and better way. Appreciate your time. Have a great day. Bye for now. Thank you. Bye bye.